Here we go. There we go. All right. So I'm talking today with a good friend, Clay Van Sickle, who is a Hollywood armorer and that I've known for a very long time, one of the specialists in this industry. And there are a very small number of actual specialist armorers with lots of experience on the job in this world. And so today I wanted to talk to you, Clay, about a couple of days ago, Alec Baldwin started to opine on what his version of what he thinks should be happening in terms of making Hollywood sets safer. A lot of people are, and some of the ideas are kind of out there, but in his opinion was that all movie sets and television programs should hire a police officer if there is a firearms involved in the production, and that police officer should become essentially the safety officer. So I'm not so sure that that's really something that can really work out for a number of reasons, given that in the time that I've known you. I mean, I first got to know you because we worked on one of the very few live fire productions that's ever been attempted by Hollywood, Top Shot.
Yep.
And the amount of work that we had to do on that show, both on the set and off the set. I mean, I basically spent a lot of time during those first two seasons going through the entire equivalent of the military standard 3510 range control and safety procedures, and surveying and looking at maps and all kinds of things that are necessary to manage safety. And then you guys who were specialists in the Hollywood art of stuff were doing both primary shoots, support shoots, all kinds of stuff. There was a lot of logistics. People don't really realize there's about 100 people walking around on one of these productions, and there's a lot of stuff going on at all times. Where so hiring, the thought that occurred to me when I heard this idea is, hiring one cop to be the safety guy to oversee 100 people is a lot to ask.
Right. Well, and it's I actually feel really bad for Baldwin in this case. He's in a horrible position, was completely let down by the people who are supposed to help him keep his set safe, including the people that hired some of those people. But ultimately, I think he's speaking out because he feels like something needs to be done, like this should have never happened. And he's right. This should have never happened. And as you well know, even on the live fire shows, we keep hearing these cockamamie theories that, oh, what if it was sabotage? Like, all right, let's be honest. That's just lawyers trying to throw in the shadow of a doubt for their client. But even if it was sabotage, if the policies and procedures that we've been using for decades had been followed, this wouldn't have happened. So getting back to the point, I feel like Baldwin is in a place where he feels that this is a high profile incident, obviously, and that he wants to do something and make things better. So from that point of view, I get it. I feel where his heart's coming from. He's operating under the assumption, though, that all police officers are weapons specialists, and they're just not.
Yeah, we know they're not.
Right. I mean, cops have a hard job, but 90% of it has nothing to do with weapons. Even the armorers on most law enforcement agencies wouldn't make great film armorers. They're really good at what they do, but they've got a very limited stock of what they need to worry about. I don't know, what does LAPD have, like 10 or so sidearms that are authorized, something like that?
Yeah, it's a fairly small list as we know, and they're, I mean, I'm on a range team for a police department, and the scenarios that you work with and the logistics that you work with, you're basically working with people who all undergo firearms training, have all gone to police academies, if they're carrying a gun inside the police department, they're presumed to be trained, and mostly what you're doing as far as range management and training and those kinds of situations is maintaining their proficiency for a perishable skill, which is not the same thing as what happens on a film set by
Not
any
even.
means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, they may know their Beretta or their Glock or their M&P, but what do they know about a flintlock pistol from the 1500s or a matchlock or a Japanese Nambu from World War II? There's such a broad range of things that armorers have to know, not only historically, mechanically, that just most police officers don't know anything about. And then you get into the blank fire only guns, which are a whole separate, lifestyle, where somebody who's trained with a Beretta 92 might pick up an Ekol 92, which is a Turkish blank fire only pistol, and think they know about it. But what they think is the takedown lever is actually the switch to make it go full auto. And, there's a lot of different variations. Sometimes those vent the gas straight up. Most cops, I can't think of a single cop, except for maybe the couple that you and I worked with on set, that would know anything about blank adapting guns and what apertures are appropriate for what blank sizes. So the idea that cops would basically just learn an entirely new career and somehow make the set safer really just falls on its face. There are specialists who do this, who have the experience, who have the knowledge, the training, and the background that already do this. That's why armorers exist in the film world. And making that distinction too, a police department's armorer does a very different job than what I do on set. So, I mean, making dummies, checking them, knowing the ins and outs of all the different types and styles of weapons, knowing how to troubleshoot the weapons on set, and more importantly, knowing when to enforce and break the rules. As you know, on Top Shot, it drove all the contestants nuts, the protocols that we have to use on a film set, because we break the rules. I keep hearing calls that, oh, Baldwin shouldn't have been aiming the gun at a person anyway. Have you ever seen a movie? We do it all the time. Guns get aimed at cameras, guns get aimed at people, but we got a separate set of protocols in place that keeps that situation safe. As you remember on Top Shot, when we had to get those shots of them holding the rifles up, for their pretty shots at the beginning of the season or throughout the season, and they kept dropping the weapon, like, keep the gun up. Well, there's somebody out there. Yeah, I know. You've cleared it. I've cleared it. The AD's cleared it. The camera guys cleared it. We all know it's cold. Welcome to Hollywood. So yeah, that rule of nobody ever gets in front of a gun isn't always the case. We'll do it with a cold gun, again, with at least 3 people checking it every single time. So, and again, the idea that a cop is the best choice, I think that just comes honestly from ignorance, because most people think, oh, police are well-trained in firearms. Police are well-trained in some firearms in a limited fashion that has to do with their job. They don't have any idea on what camera setups look like. They don't have any idea on what safe firing angles are for a 45 full load versus a 45 quarter load versus a 500 Smith & Wesson full load or a quarter load. So these are all the real specific industry focused items that police officers just don't have.
Correct. And so let's take that scenario for a minute. I don't really think anything replaces the specialist knowledge of an armorer on set, because it's a craft, right? I mean, and there's not that many people to do it that understand the ins and outs of that craft, and it is a vital part of telling the story in terms of movie cinematography. However, it's because they are a prop and are a very powerful mechanism for moving a story along as happens in the world of entertainment. So the thought that they're going to go away is probably there are some people that are looking at that option, but it would detract too much from the storytelling ability of the theatrical arts. So, but let me ask a question from this point of view, from the essentially, when I listen to Baldwin's appeal, what I'm really hearing is that the job of safety may not be as high a priority on set when in the context of a very busy set, because the sets are basically run to production schedules, production costs, and making movies is about not running out of money before the job is done. Sure. And some of the cost cutting corners that can happen are, if you have an armorer who is part of the staff, but if that armorer has duties that detract from their ability to pay attention to that primary job, it becomes very difficult to sustain that over the long run of a production. And also, if that job is not a high enough priority in terms of its level in the balance of power of the deliberations of activities and what is it's a company, right? Doing work. So when I hear him say that, I think one of the things that pops out to me is that he may actually be saying that the emphasis on safety isn't as high as it should be in the industry, and that may be an area where there is a legitimate reassessment of how things work. That
I agree. Yeah, this happened at a very interesting time historically in the film industry, because IATSE is literally in the middle of a huge contract negotiation with the AMPTP, the producers union. And these are some of the things that they're talking about. So with Rust specifically, we've already found out that this armorer, A, was grossly unqualified, and B, was hired to do 2 jobs. And I know personally 2 prop people who bailed out of the show, even though they were offered it, specifically because of that issue. I talk about on set a lot. Armorers exist because we have a very a specificity of purpose on set. I have one job. I don't have to worry about, in this scene, I don't have to worry about my phone, the water bottle, anything else the actor may touch on camera. I worry about the guns, and that's it. Because, I mean, you look back at some of the 4, and I'm going to point that out, 4 deaths in film history due to guns, all due to negligence. But in at least one of them, the fact that a person who is not specifically focused on just the guns was handling the guns was one of the contributing factors that led to Brandon Lee's death. So going back a little further, yes, the idea of safety on set is huge and obviously very near and dear to my craft and my job. And I don't know that we can say that safety on set is a global thing, if that makes any sense, because the film industry is not a monolithic entity. It's not film industry studios, we all walk in and we all get our paycheck from that. It's literally thousands of completely unrelated production companies of all different varieties, of different budget levels, and each show is its own company. You'll often see at the end of the credits, if you sit there that long, for the purposes of UK or whatever law, this film is, the film company is title of the film LLC. Because at the end of that film, that company dissipates and goes away, and somebody buys that product and then distributes it. So the idea that we can just globally make things safer is difficult, but the unions and the groups that work within the industry are currently fighting to try to make those things happen, to get proper turnarounds, to get appropriate pay scales, etc. So yes, I agree with you. I think improving set safety is a great idea. And like you said, having the appropriate people in place, having the qualified and experienced people who know when to stand up and say, this is not okay, we're stopping this, is vital. And that is always something that armorers, stunts, special effects, and honestly, any crew member should have in their back pocket, but those 3 especially, because those are considered the risky professions in the industry. At any point, we can just go, yeah, we're not doing that. We're going to take our ball and we're going to go home. I try to avoid that. I'd rather say, we can't do that, but we could do this. Let's adjust and we'll make it safe. But I think in this case, you had someone who again, doing two jobs, which should not have happened. So that liability falls on the producer that hired them in those two positions. Somebody who was not qualified for the positions in the first place and not willing to go, whoa, we need to slow down for a second. It just takes 30 seconds to run through these cylinders so everybody knows what's happening. And instead got bullied and pushed over, or wasn't even there. That's kind of a vague area right now. So I think if there can be a focus on making sure that qualified personnel who have the background are hired, I think that's a great start. But how exactly that's going to happen, I mean, the devil's in the details. It's going to come down to, who's picking these people, who's vetting them, who's got the background and who doesn't. So,
yeah. Well, so let me take a couple of observations there. One, I mean, if I'm not really sure that the police officer hired to be responsible for safety could accept that degree of liability, because you're essentially asking one person to take responsibility. So if anything goes wrong, that you become the scapegoat, right?
Right.
And
well, which is part of the point that's why the armor exists. There's supposed to be a chain of custody from armor to talent to armor. So you always know, hey, something bad happened. Whose fault was it? Oh, that person. It's that simple. But then you get other people getting involved in the chain of custody, and suddenly we have this issue.
Right. So, and I've seen that from that point of view. And I also am very well aware of the fact that any production that has a lot of people in it has countervailing interests of time, effort, focus, and that type of thing. But let me ask you one more question, which has to do with so you've got, as you noted, crew having a very big emphasis on improving conditions and improving protocols, because it's in your case as an armor, a singular focus on that particular aspect of the production. The other question I have having to do with set safety is the question of whether or not, if there are firearms being used in a production, everyone involved with the production has to go through some level of firearms training if they are going to be anywhere in around that property or property rooms or anything else like that. From the point of view, and I take this back to the police range officers scenario that I'm familiar with, which is that I really am working with everybody there is regularly trained to be above a minimum level of competency in order to be armed at all, or to be around and have access to firearms, to have access to ammunition, to have access to range time or whatever else. So from the and understanding that it's a very varied industry with people who have very differing views on interacting with firearms, and some of them really don't want to have anything to do with it. But the question then becomes, is it a good idea from the point of view of set safety to set a minimum standard for anybody involved with the production having to go through and having to understand how this stuff works, what the procedures are, and so that in any live fire situation or any interacting with guns on a regular basis in real life, everybody is a safety officer, right? And that's kind of the expectation of real world shooting. Is that another area of exploration that the industry should be going through as far as all personnel involved with the production if firearms are involved?
So that is currently the case for IATSE props people. So if you're going to be a prop master, prop assistant, prop maker, I'm probably missing some others, but if you're in that craft, there is a class, a basic safety class about firearms on set, blanks, aim offs, all that kind of stuff. Everybody that I know that's gone through it says basically the same thing. It's got some room for improvement. But that is also limited to the props craftspeople. I think having the ability for people who wish to have a class of some sort to go through the basics, I don't think is a bad idea at all. And it is something that we sort of do every day. And anytime a weapon comes on set, we do our safety brief at the beginning of the day and generally just before each shot. So at that time, I lay out, and most of the good armors, all the guys, Larry, Carl, all those guys, they'll lay out the basic procedures. Here's what a cold gun means. Here's when you can check it, which the answer to that is any freaking time you ask. Here's what a hot gun means. Here's what I'm going to do when the gun goes hot. Here's what the blank safe distances are, all that stuff. We'll cover all of that in a safety brief. So in effect, they are getting a truncated class pretty much every time a weapon comes on set. But I think once you reach outside of the props crafts, I think it's less important for hands-on training, more important for theoretical training and basically, like you said, the procedures on set. So that a camera assistant or first AC or whoever, if they're new to a set that maybe they've never been on a set with firearms, that's fine. So they've at least got a background in it, and it's actually something I'm working on off to the side. We're going to do a print test with photos of different blanks on paper at different ranges, just as a baseline, so that crew members who may not have a background in weapons can go, oh yeah, we're shooting a 38 tomorrow. Oh, okay, well here's what it does to a piece of paper at 5 feet, at 10 feet, at 15 feet. So I've kind of got a feel for when I should be concerned for my operator's safety or my camera's safety or whatnot. So I think that's a great idea. And honestly, the more information there is, the better. Nothing I do is a secret. I don't think, I think Larry and Carl and all the guys will agree with that. We don't deal in secrets. The last thing we want is surprises on set. So if anybody wants to ask me and get deep into how anything works, absolutely. If I've got the time, I'll be happy to share all those trade secrets. And another thing that just popped into my head as well, talking about having a safety officer on set. After the Brandon Lee tragedy I'm not going to remember the year right now, but after that tragedy, it was codified in most union sets that the first AD is now the safety officer in charge of safety for the whole crew and also the cast. So ultimately the buck is supposed to stop with them when it comes to safety. If they, whether that's helicopters or rain or whatever we're dealing with. In addition to that, you've got the stunt coordinator and often the key grip, who is the old safety officer, but often they still kind of function in that capacity. So you've already got people on set who are tasked with this. And in California, at least, almost every set that I'm on, when they require blank gunfire, almost every set will require a fire safety advisor if you're in county, or fire safety officer if you're in LA City. And in most of California, that's the case as well. Sometimes they're on duty guys, sometimes they're off duty. It depends on their setup. But they're there to represent the authority having jurisdiction to make sure that the set overall is not causing liability or concern or risk to the surrounding community. So we've got FSAs, and many of them are very interested. Some of them have a background in guns and are like, oh, what are you shooting? That's really cool. Can I see the blanks? Yes, no problem. So we have some of those people in place. And again, that works fairly well in California. Again, we have only had 4 deaths in film history in the world over more than 100 years. 4. Every one of them caused by negligence. Every one of them caused by not following the protocols in some way or another. There is no other department in film, in the global film. I don't want to talk about it monolithically, but globally in film, there is no other department that has a death rate that low. I mean, you talk about electrics, people get electrocuted, grip equipment falls on people, they drive off the road after the end of a long night. Tons and tons of things happen on sets that can be risky. Generally, people see a weapon and they're like, oh, I should be careful around this. So it sort of has a gravitas already on set. So I think I had a point with all this, but I forgot where I was going.
Okay.
Safety officers, right? So we've already got people in place. But again, because I can't talk about film monolithically because it doesn't work that way, what works well in California is not the same thing in New Mexico. New Mexico is a whole different state, their own laws and their own rules. And then you go to Louisiana or to Oregon or to Ohio. All these states have different rules. I mean, heck, you get into Los Angeles, there are some cities that have different rules. Some cities use Film LA for their film permitting process and their firearm notification and all that stuff. Some cities do it themselves. So there is this patchwork of regulations and rules that production companies have to navigate in the first place just to make the film, and then add on special effects and guns and all these other items that they've got to figure out. So it's trying to find one solution is going to be difficult when there is no through line. Even unions, I mean, unions can only do so much. They can only make changes on sets that are signatories to that union. So while this may have been an IATSE show, the rules in New Mexico are different than they are here. So again, that reach can only go so far.
Yep. Yeah. And which argues actually the case for making sure that there are specialists who do understand how to navigate these things. And
right.
For anybody that's ever worked in or touched that world of production, it is an intricate dance of many different things going on. There are a lot of meetings. I mean, like when I did Top Shot, I mean, I was in meetings almost all the time, having to do with working out details, and and got to witness that the working out of details would involve middle level producers that had different ideas from each other, and you would go through the whole process of making things work, and then you would have to get that back out to the different parts of the crew to coordinate it. They're intricate productions that requires very specialized skills. So and that's kind of why, when I saw the Baldwin piece and his call to action, I'm going, well, there's that doesn't quite cover the intricacy of how this really works in real life. And and I know you guys, right? I mean, like one of the better things that came out of the experience of working in the entertainment world is you actually get to meet the specialty crew that understands the bits and pieces and the puts, and and get to understand that the sound guy will want to record that sound over and over and over and over again until you tell him we're out of ammo. And
sorry, man, I only got 5 rounds left. Let's get this done.
Yeah. And but that's the way the world works. So let me ask, I think you made a very good point in terms of it's not really the procedures or rules. Is the culture of the set such that it is amenable and accepting of those rules, and that's not just crew at that point. It's not just production. It's also talent. And from that point of view, do you have any thoughts on how alterations in the culture of sets having to do with the totality of it, including talent, might be improved?
Yeah, the culture is one of the things that came up recently in the IATSE negotiations too. And talking about Russ specifically, you can back this up to the people that are vetting their crew before they hire them. So that culture of, well, I'll hire somebody who's inexperienced and a local, and nothing against local crews, they're fantastic, but I'll hire somebody inexperienced who's cheaper so I can get my tax credit, instead of hiring somebody who's experienced and knows what they're doing. That's part of the culture. Like you said, from the producer standpoint, they've got to provide a product at a budget. They have this amount of money plus some overages that they need to do this with. And I always appreciate it when I get calls from producers before they make a budget and say, hey, we want to do this. How much does it cost? As opposed to, hey, we need all this stuff. Here's how much money we have. And I went, well, you're an order of magnitude short. So let's figure out what you can do and what you need to change. So that idea of bringing the specialists in early. I mean, I'm not going to do a full script breakdown for free, but if you have some questions about roughly what things cost so you can kind of budget out your film, please call me. I'll be happy to sit down for an hour with you and save you the hassle of getting screwed at the end by just thinking, oh, I can just budget $500 for guns and that's fine. Okay, that doesn't get me out of bed, let alone rentals and blanks and permits and all that other stuff. So that, from that point, yes. Moving on down the line, I think technology has changed such, especially in the entertainment world, that the gatekeepers of who can make movies and TV shows are mostly gone, because anybody can. I can pick up this iPad right now and shoot broadcast quality video, which is good in a lot of ways. At the same time, it puts inexperienced and unqualified people, I don't even want to say unqualified, it puts inexperienced people in the position of hiring people that they don't really understand. I'm hired all the time by people much younger than me who may have never worked with a gun on set, which is fine. That's why you hire the specialists, but they don't even know what they don't know, if that makes sense. So that is, I don't want to say a problem, but it's an issue that producers and aspiring producers should be aware of, that a lot of times reach out to these people ahead of time to learn what you need to learn to do your job, and then to let us do our jobs later. So that culture of just assuming, well, I've got, $1,000 in the budget, we'll throw in, the 5 Tommy guns. Okay, so let's back you up there a little bit. But the overall safety, the culture of safety and the culture of cutting corners and just getting it done and pushing through, that is something that in my position, I'm in a very privileged position, and I know special effects and stunts also have this background, because we can always just take our ball and go home. Most crew members can't do that. If a camera op says, hey, I don't feel safe about this, or a boom op says that, and the production just wants to poo-poo it, they can just replace them. There are other boom ops, there are other camera operators, there are other craft services people, whoever the position is. So we have not only a privileged position, but we've also got a responsibility to watch out for the crew, to have their best interest in mind. And we can do that within our lane, if that makes sense. And those 3 departments work very closely together anyway, but within our lane, we've got a lot of responsibility and control over what happens safely on set. The other problems come when, oh, well, it's just this quick little scene, let's throw this together, completely separate from gun special effects and stunts, but it requires a gigantic company move, and they just want to slam it together and get it in at the 18th hour on the day. People are exhausted. Now we've got to drive an hour and a half home. Those are the things that I think most productions think about the safety on their set. Before you get there and after you leave, they don't care generally, because it's not what they're paying for. But I think that idea that in some ways they are responsible for that. Again, guns, we generally charge portal to portal from when we leave our shop to when we come back to our shop, because we're responsible for our gear that whole time legally. But most other crew members don't get that, because the production doesn't really care about them. And I don't mean to make that sound mercenary, but the production itself, that entity, doesn't really care what they do when they're not there getting paid. But that time directly affects their time on set. The energy they come in with in the morning, and the exhaustion they leave with at the end of the day, and are they going to make it home safe? Those are all things that I think desperately need to be addressed. I know a lot of people are talking about this most recent IATSE contract tentative agreement, and they're talking about, they basically received a pay cut for the same amount of work because the pay raise hasn't kept up with inflation and cost of living. That's one thing. The turnaround time, I mean, the argument is we need a 12-hour on, 12 hours off. I'm trying to remember, I don't think you were on that show, but we did a show called Stars Are in Stripes. I did a 22-hour day one day. That's a long damn day. I mean, thankfully
yes, it is.
Yeah. But thankfully that was only one. But I hear these horror stories on some of these shows of these guys doing 18-hour days, day after day after day, 5 days in a row. And by the time you get to Friday, well, it's really Saturday, and there goes your weekend. You got to be back to work on Monday, bright and early. So yeah, I definitely think the culture of just rushing, just get it done, the show must go on mentality really needs to take a step back and remember these are not cogs in a machine. They're human beings, all of us, whether it's the PA, the craft services person, the director of photography, the director, cast, all of us, we all need to be mindful that we're all humans, and production needs to take that into account when scheduling, when budgeting. All these things need to be taken into account. And you mentioned with actors as well. I was literally yesterday talking to an actor about this. We ask actors to do, pardon my French, shit that would make us all explode. They dig into emotions that most of us suppress our entire lives. They do weird stuff that most of us cannot do. And I give them a lot of credit for that. And it's not easy. It's hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. Ask every aspiring actor in Hollywood. So I will always show an actor a cold gun when it comes on set. If they're in their moment and they're trying to get into character for this, emotional time, I try to stay out of their way as much as possible, but I still have a responsibility to, at the very least, offer them the options to see this gun empty. Some will wave me off, and that's fine. I've done my due diligence. I've gone through the AD, I've gone through me, and we know the gun is cold. So I think, well, I've already seen it happen. I think actors are going to be more mindful of the opportunity they have, the agency they have to ensure their own safety, let alone the safety of the people around them. I think going forward, that's probably going to be a thing.
Do you think that's going to be a cultural shift?
I do. And I think the diva mentality that we often hear about, in Hollywood, I think that's already trending away. That those people don't tend to continue working as up and coming actors. The old established folks who have that attitude, I mean, they'll get away with it probably for the rest of their careers until they fade out and aren't working anymore. But new people, that just isn't really tolerated like it was in, call it the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. So I think that is already a shift that's happening. And I think in this specific instance, I think that most actors, regardless of levels, I've worked with A-list all the way down to people just starting out. I think that respect for stunts, special effects, guns, risky things that we do on set, things that have some inherent risk, I think that's already happening. And I think this is going to push it even further. I caution folks not to have a knee-jerk response. Let's have a measured response and understand that this is already generally, firearms specifically, very safe on set when handled by professionals. It's when you get the yahoos who want to film things without permits, or productions who want to hire unqualified people because they're cheap. That's when you run into issues. I remember a producer telling me once, he kind of talked through what he wanted. I gave him prices and he went, "Yeah, I think you're overqualified for our show." I said, "Okay, I'm just going to stop you right there, because there is no such thing as an overqualified armorer or special effects coordinator or stunt coordinator. Those are not the people you want to go bargain basement on. The people that you want in those positions are the people who already know the problems you're going to have before you have them, help you avoid them, and get your day done faster. Yes, my day rate is more expensive than other people's. I get that. My assistants will be less expensive because they don't have the experience. They're learning under my watch because I know what to watch for with them. Same deal. But productions need to understand that if you're hiring keys, especially keys in charge of safety of multiple people on set, you can't go cheap. You need to pay the rate. You need to pay the rentals. You need to do it right. Ultimately, if you don't have the money to do it safe, you don't have the money to do it. Period. End of story. Full stop.
Okay. Well, so as I'm listening to you, there are principles of accident prevention, right? Because nobody wants something like what happened on that
No.
movie to happen. So the accident prevention is really the enculturation of not creating situations where a mistake can happen. And you just went over a number of situational scenarios where you can generate the opening for a mistake. Because all it takes is, and the thing about catastrophic accidents is that it's usually a series of safety checks that are bypassed in order for that accident to actually occur. And 5, 6, 7 checks that just didn't happen, and the probabilities of them are very low, which speaks to a general overall good safety record. But the probability that they can happen are there. I mean, and it's not just in entertainment having to do with the riskier aspects of the entertainment business, but it happens in everything. I mean, we lost a space shuttle once because checks and boundaries were, the error got through. And that was probably like 100, 200 steps of stuff that had to happen in sequence, and it does happen. So back to the culture of not, do you think in terms of coming out of this experience that the step up in cultural awareness will decrease the probability of something like this happening again by an order of magnitude, or is it like a temporary fix? What do you think the long run of this will be?
I think at the very least, crew members, individual on the ground, those of us working in the trenches, I think at the very least, all of us are going to be like, hey, wait, let's slow this down and make our voices heard. And again, that goes from the camera crew to the grips to whoever on set. I think already everybody's saying, look, whether they're union or not, that has no bearing. But we're all a family on a set, and we're all friends, and none of us want to hurt each other. And it's totally doable. The idea that, we got to rush, we got to just push through this, it's not true. So 2 extreme examples. One, working on The Changeling with Clint Eastwood, 8-hour shooting days. Full stop. 8 hours days from when camera is called to when camera wraps. Every single day. Granted, those budgets tend to be very large. So everybody's like, well, not every show can do that. Okay, well, the show I'm on right now for the History Channel, not a huge budget, not a giant crew, but they are smart and compassionate for their people. Because again, I'm in a smaller market. I happen to be in Minnesota at the moment, before I head back to LA. But all these people know each other personally. It's a very small community. Getting back to the point, their priority is, we have a product, we need to get it done safely. Then we need to get it done on budget. And they are hyper aware, especially last night, the first night we did gunfire since the Rust incident, with them. And everybody was hyper interested and very aware. There was never a rush to get the gunfire done. Oh, is there an issue? Sure. How long do you need? Just 30 seconds. Okay, great. Take whatever time you need. But again, like you said, that comes back to the culture from the beginning, from budgeting, from scheduling, from knowing, look, we've got a complicated thing to do today. Let's not try to cram 8 pages of dialogue plus this big gunfight in. It's kind of the I don't know, everybody knows that it's that dirty little secret that, okay, yeah, we're going to shoot all day, and oh yeah, that big gunfight or that big stunt or that big explosion, that's going to be the very last thing we shoot. And it's kind of a sad joke that so many shows do that. I had Mike Gunther, who is Michael Bay's stunt coordinator, wonderful guy, but he comes from a stunt background. We did a series of features with him, and the very first things up every day, okay, we got that big fight to do, let's crank it out and get it out of the way. So the culture shift is happening in some places, but I think sometimes the idea that we can, kind of kick that can down the road to the end of the day or to the end of the week, and we'll wait to do that big thing. Get it out of the way, so the stress is off of everybody's mind, and we're all doing this kind of stuff when we're fresh. It's totally doable. It just takes thinking about your schedule and getting the things that take time done in the time that you have, and the things that you can push a little bit. Okay, yeah, I know we want to focus on dialogue between our two lead actors. That's great, but we can do that anytime. You have your specialist here on this day. Let's do this stuff and do it safely, and not try to just squeeze it in whenever we can. So, and again, I think that is already happening. And I think crew and cast are realizing that they do have the agency to go, yeah, this is not okay. And to know that other crew members will back them up, which is sort of the point of the unions in the entertainment industry existing in the first place. But I think it goes beyond that. It's just, we're all a family, whether it's a union show or not. If somebody says, hey, there's a safety issue, I'm going to stop everything and go, let's fix your safety concern. It just takes a second. What's your concern? Is it valid? Yes, no. If it's not, here's why. Are you satisfied? Yes, great. Let's move on. If you're not, then let's change the angle. Let's move somebody 3 feet further away. We can do this shot in post. There's always an option to make things safer. And there's never a reason not to. At the end of the day, we are not curing cancer. We are making a freaking TV show. It is not that important. It is not worth anybody getting hurt or certainly dead. It's just a movie.
Well, okay. Well, this has been a very interesting conversation from the point of view of we started off with it was really a reference to a very simplistic solution being posited by somebody who is really hurting,
Mhm.
and because it's that's just a reality, because it is still human beings.
Yeah.
And we've walked through essentially the complexity of production and a number of ways that Hollywood can improve technique or craft in order to enculturate better practices and remove the opportunities to make a mistake, being fresh, having agency, increasing the number of people that are trained. All these things all add, and they're layers of safety that come into the whole process that makes it so your accident rate can drop by to 10% of what it was before, which is so your mean time between failure is ideally a lifetime, right? Or an entire career, that you never actually see one of these accidents in your entire career happen. Which is kind of the goal. And you've gone over the fact that some of those things are already happening and are already in place. And so at this point, last thought before I shut the recording off. You see the outside world reacting with all these knee-jerk, very simplistic solutions, legislative solutions, and stuff like that. From an industry insider standpoint, of somebody that's actually like deeply ingrained in this cultural process of filmmaking, what do you say to all the people that are trying to come up with solutions that are clearly unrealistic?
It's obvious in most cases, whether it's the state legislator here or we've heard some federal things popping around as well. It's obvious they've never been on a film set or anywhere near one to begin with. And one of the best pieces of advice I got the first day I stepped on a film set was, stop helping. It's not your job to help camera crew move their stuff. You don't know what that stuff does. Stop touching it. Stop trying to help them. Do your job. So maybe stop helping, or get educated. More importantly, don't, Mr. State Legislator, whose name I'm forgetting kind of on purpose, don't just say, oh, I'm going to introduce this bill. Maybe, hey, call ISS, call Movie Gun Guy, call Hand Property, call the specialists that are in your state, that are your constituents, and say, hey, what happened? How can we make this safer? Reach out to us, because any state legislator, it has no idea what a film set looks like, what the realities are day to day, what the actual safety protocols are. That was, I mean, I guess it's 2 Fridays ago now. Starting that Saturday when we started finally taking interviews, that's all I've been doing is laying out, look, here's how it's supposed to work. We've got this whole process already in place. This was not followed. That's why we have this tragedy. So, and I've heard more than one news anchor say, hey, I didn't even know, I don't think most of America knew what an armorer was before last week. So we're this tiny little niche. There's maybe 100 of us in North America that are full-time, plus, you know, all the adjacent armor prop masters and whatnot working with weapons on set. There's not many of us. So trying to say that, well, clearly this one high-profile case proves that there's a major endemic problem in the industry is idiocy to begin with. There were obviously major problems on this particular show, but trying to talk about Hollywood globally or monolithically doesn't make sense. Every show is different. Every dynamic is different. I remember having this conversation with my dad. I'm looking for work every week. I have to get a new job every week, right? And all of us are like that. We all bounce show to show to show. Some people are on TV shows for a long run, and that's great. But generally in the film world, you hop onto a film, you do the run of the film, move on to the next film. So having one solution doesn't make sense because it's a new company, a new situation every single time. It's the reason I don't answer the question to a director of photography. Well, how close can I get to the gun? Forget about that. Show me what you want to see, because every shot's going to be different. Every show is going to be different. Show me what you want to see. I'll make it safe. And as you said, there is no one easy solution. That may make you feel good, but you didn't do anything. It's a complicated problem. And safety on set is ultimately the overall problem. And that is an issue that I know IATSE is fighting with right now. And I hope that they make some really strong strides in making a cultural shift to help everyone on set remember, hey, we're human beings. The show must go on is not the be all and end all. I must go home to my family is the be all and end all for me. You know, this is not something I do for my health. It's my job. I like it. I enjoy it a lot. I like to think I'm good at it. But at the end of the day, it's not my identity. It's none of our identities. We're all human beings, and we deserve to be treated as such, and we deserve to be in a safe workspace. So trying to find one overarching solution for that, not going to be easy, and it's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be satisfying, you know, which is what I think a lot of these people are looking for. We need to do something now that fixes this. I mean, that got us, you know, a wide variety of problems after 9/11. Oh, well, let's make the TSA in charge of security. I mean, did that really work well? You could argue that either way. But knee-jerk reactions are rarely long-term comprehensive solutions to a complicated problem, which is what this is.
Yes, and it very clearly is. So, well, this is good, you know, and thanks, Clay. You've been very generous with your time to have this conversation, and I think it will be illuminating to anybody that takes the time to hear how complex and also how professional the people that live in that world try to be, and how tragic it is when all of the procedures that have been carefully worked out still fail. I think you're right that the thought that coming up with a simple solution or a simplistic solution probably hurts more than it helps, because it causes a lot of things to pivot out of place. And these are all very carefully orchestrated balances of how do you get the job done and not bust the budget,
Right.
get the creativity that you need. I mean, it's a very technical craft now. It's not just pointing a camera and doing a TikTok, right? I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of work and I don't think people really understand that, the final cut of a movie is you could be shooting 30 seconds could be like 30 different things being shot independently and then reassembled to make it look like whoever it is that imagined what should be seen by the viewer looks like. And shots that the camera stops before the shot happens, and then the actual shot is actually done completely separately on a completely different day.
Yep.
And it's cut there and it appears on the screen for like a second and a half, and then and that's it, and it's gone, right? I mean, but that's how intricate this work is. And to attempt to change that creative process with simplistic solutions, it just kind of bothered me when I can see people wanting to make the problem go away, but it's not so much a problem, it's a process. So
Right.
Thanks for the time. I mean, I really appreciate that you took a while out of your time in the Great White North.
Not quite yet, but maybe next week they might get some stuff.
It is getting that time of year where it's going to look like that for the next 6 months. So
yeah, hopefully I'll be going.
Yeah, very good. Well, thanks, Clay, and I'll get this thing tidied up, and then I'm going to put it up and let people hear a little bit more about the inside world of where this comes from.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah.